Welcome, everyone, to day 16 of the expanded virtual conference for conscious capitalism. It has been quite a journey that we have been on together over these past weeks, and we are thrilled that that is continuing this week. Today, we have a fantastic speaker and thought leader who has worked in many interesting scenarios and with many different types of companies around the world, and is going to be bringing you some amazing content to help us focus on trust and cultivate that even during these challenging times. And to welcome her further, I'd like to invite Alexander Makobin, our CEO.
Thank you, Amanda. And I want to say thank you to everyone joining in right now and who joined in last week during the expanded version of the expanded virtual conference. It was just so amazing to see so many people participate and engage one another in that week, where we had hoped to be together in person in Jersey City, but as with everyone else in the world, are finding new ways for us to connect with the community and for the community to stay connected virtually now. For the first 3 weeks, we opened this by talking about the immense challenges that everyone's facing and how unusual the situation is. And I feel like as we come to the second half of this expanded virtual conference, the second half of April, we're all starting to think about what the new normal is going to look like, where we presence ourselves with that, where conscious capitalism fits in with that. And today, it's just so exciting to have Tevis Trower come and work with all of us, because she's thinking about that too and is going to address that in some important ways, thinking about how you look at the future of your company and where that fits in with conscious capitalism. Tevis has been involved in the community for years now. I remember we were talking back in 2016 when I first joined Conscious Capitalism Tevis, and it's so exciting to have you speaking here again. What I love about Tevis's company, Balance Integration, is that you started this initially as a yoga mindfulness company and have expanded it over the years to include so much more than that, this broad spectrum of ways to bring humanity into the workplace for businesses to really look at their cultures, that it goes so much further than before. Tevis, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom with the community. We are just so excited to have you back here.
Thanks so much, Alexander, and thanks, Amanda. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out. This conversation about trust is, it's kind of funny because as I look at the screens, I see there's so much trust already being exhibited here by us as a community, right? We're showing up exactly as we are. If I ask for a show of hands, barefoot, right? A show of hands who hasn't showered today, right? A show of hands. There's all kinds of aspects of humanity that's coming to work with us every day now. And the question is, how do we move forward with this as our new paradigm? Hold on one second, I'm going to go into screen share because we're going to dive into this question doing a couple things. We're going to be looking at some data. First, two questions. How do you show up as a leader, and what's your legacy? We're going to dig into some data so that it's not just the conscious capitalism, this is a really good idea, and firms of endearment, etc. Everyone is showing us data of what it means to build trust and be a human CEO or leader. So we're going to dive through some of the data. Then we're going to talk about what does that mean for you. You may or may not be a CEO, but what does it mean for you in terms of how you show up? And then we're going to look at your journey. So if you wanted to be in a session that you don't have to do anything, this is not that session, okay? You're actually going to have to reflect and think and apply some concepts, which hopefully will give you more in the end, because it will not be a sit back thing, it's going to be a lean in thing. And then we're going to look at how do you apply this to what your legacy is. So that's the adventure that you're on, so buckle up, and for the next 90 minutes, I'll be your tour guide. So ask yourself, how do you show up? Like, what automatically comes to mind? Because here's what the trust barometer in 2019 said is now being expected. Now, I'm giving you the data up front because a lot of us need that to quiet the discursive mind, saying, well, no one ever taught me that about how to lead. I never saw the CEOs I worked for lead that way. I really want you to absorb what millions of dollars in research have unearthed about what people are saying. And far back as 2019, which seems like 500 years ago at this point, I started doing some dog and pony shows with the folks who are the keepers of the trust barometer for Edelman. And they had seen a shift in trust across the verticals of power in our society. And part of what they saw is that for the first time ever, people were saying they trusted their employer more than they trusted the government, more than they trusted the media, more than they trusted nonprofits or churches or any kind of vertical of power outside of their employer. So this was kind of huge because what it really said is when I have a social contract with you, I feel like I've got a little bit more say over how you act. So how you act's a big question, and the expectation is authenticity. And I know all of us are up to here with authenticity, right? With this conversation of authenticity. We're like, I'm working from home in my PJs, how much more authentic could I be? But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to how we inspire and how we dig deep in the moment of crisis and not just respond, but go back to core values, go back to our truth and take a pause to ask ourselves, am I responding as a fully embodied human being with all of my fragility and still trusting the relationship with my employees that they're going to understand that I have the capacity to lead them forward because I am human. So the question marks have really been gaps around honesty, that employees feel like they're not always being told the whole truth, that they don't actually get a straight shake on what a CEO's values are. And I call this kind of a symptom of heads nodding, right? The corporations spend a lot of money to bring in a consultant and come up with a value statement and mission statement, and everyone around the C-suite table, they all know, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's all be more human. Let's care about our employees more. But a lot of times employees are not trusting it because they don't see it reflected in policies and in infrastructure that actually guides the course of the organization forward. The other thing they're not seeing is people standing up and speaking up and pointing out when something's out of alignment, when something in society is not jiving. And that's what they're expecting. They want you to lead change. They don't want you to wait for the government to impose it on you. They want for you to step forward and do the right thing. And I know that all of these values really sound in alignment with conscious capitalism. The question is, in this moment of crisis, how much are we stepping back from the maelstrom and asking ourselves, which of these things can we effectively move forward on right now? Because once everything goes back to normal, it's really easy for everyone to say, no, we don't want to rock the boat. Showing up for employees is key. So speaking out, not just according to what's going on within the industry, political events, yes, they want you to get political, national crises, which all of us are in the middle of, and what that means to employees specifically. So right now, that's playing out with coronavirus in the form of sick pay, healthcare, furlough, work from home, support, and infrastructure. So if this was true in 2019, right, when the report came out just a year ago, imagine what these numbers are like now. This is make or break for all of us as leaders. Every action that we take is going to land even more significantly on the people that we impact specifically, as in a lot of cases, there's nowhere else for people to turn for leadership. So speaking up on issues, the other thing that was really curious to me is how the higher you go up in the food chain, the greater the expectation is. So the people who are most proximate to the C-suite or to the CEO are the people for whom these expectations are even higher. Spontaneity. Everything can't be planned, especially now. I know that a lot of us are saying that our agendas for meetings, we're postponing even structuring them until the day before, until an hour before. But the days of repolishing a statement from the organization, of vetting everything through investor relations, internal communications, etc., those are the days of standing behind a podium, standing aside from the people that you lead and influence. And right now, people want you in the trenches with them, not just in your living room with them on a screen, but literally they want to have a sense of what are the unvarnished responses that will convey to them the values that you truly embody. I wanted to show this as an image for what they expect in terms of work-life balance, because everyone is struggling to create boundaries currently. When the organizations go from largely work on site to almost a majority work from home, it's kind of interesting. We've spoken to some clients that, oh, well, for years, we've had 40% of our population working from home, so we're kind of surprised that everyone is struggling so much. But the interesting thing is that 40% was always tethered to a work rhythm being maintained by the 60%. And that's no longer true. And when people's nervous symptoms are completely exacerbated by fears from every corner, whether it's public health, what's going on with the marketplace, do I get enough face time with my boss, am I still connecting to my team, etc. This propensity to overwork to deliver on these imagined fears is even greater. So this notion of leadership being transparent around struggles around work life, and then creating practices around it and modeling from it is really key to helping your people stay sane through a crisis, and showing that your leadership is real time. It's not just a policy. So a big thing that we have seen is that everyone likes to think about a TED Talk, or I'm going to be a vulnerable leader and really talk about my story. And a lot of times people feel that earnestly, but a lot of times what happens is in the moment of truth, when a microphone's in front of someone, or they've got the whole team on a conference call, and they're moving into sorting out the latest crisis, the knee-jerk reaction is, how do I look good? How do I quiet fears? How do I come across as competent? When really, the thing that's mostly going to give people exactly that is hearing what your true story is. And exposing it, not from a standpoint of being a superhero who's always had it altered and figured out and you've got a superpower, but actually from all the times you've had to walk through uncertainty and how you've done that. Being relatable. So I don't know what your policies are around profanity, right? I don't know. But these are the kinds of things that people pay attention to in terms of, does my CEO just say it like it is? Does my leader tell me a true response, or is everything hedged? So I think you guys get the point from this study. What people are looking for is that you tell the truth, that you communicate in an ongoing basis, that your employees feel like they have a voice. So are you giving them a mechanism through which to express? That your CEO, i.e. you, because you're the leader, that you're really embodying the values that you purport to stand for. And are you including employees in solving problems? Are you asking them what they would do? I saw Kip Tennell from the Container Store speak so amazingly about when his company had the skids in 2008, and he could have superimposed some draconian measures on his team, but instead he turned the problem to the team. And he said that the level of generosity and collaboration and really communal spirit and solving problems was way greater than anything he would have ever even asked them for. So that kind of spirit, again, a lot of times as leaders, we think we have to look like we've got it all figured out. And what people want is to really be brought in. They want to be a part of the solution, the finding of the solution. So the net of this picture, it kind of flies in the face of a lot of the command and control, a lot of the old school assumptions that have been set forth as what a leader is, right? This notion of the Superman, right? The person flies in and, oh, they just happen to have powers because they're born on another planet, or maybe they got bit by a spider and so they've turned those into superpowers that no one else has. But what people are looking for is not just someone to come in. It's like the, oh, save me, Superman. That's not what people are looking for. Because in your heroic experience, they want to be called and reminded of their own. So by imparting what that has been for you, you're inviting them to step up to the plate in a much more powerful way. The pieces of this include, are you showing your humanity above and beyond who showered today, right? Are you showing what your concerns are and what your fears are and how you're working through them? Not from a standpoint of, I can't do this, I'm overwhelmed by this, but this is calling for my own resourcefulness. This is calling for my own resiliency. This isn't a cakewalk, and being transparent about that. From a standpoint of actually calling upon them and engaging them to be part of the solution. A lot of companies are cutting back. A lot of companies are struggling to really look at, how do we treat our hourlies? How do we deal with our furlough? How do we deal with our sick paid leave? And by turning these questions over to employees, you just might come up with some solutions that far outstrip the creativity that can be created in a conference room by the C-suite. And last but not least, are you really aligning? Are you aligning with everything you guys are saying that you stand for, or that you've communicated to your team throughout the years? Because one thing that is coming, and much as Alexander has referenced it, is that how you act now is something you're going to have to stand from as we move forward. People will not forget. And I was speaking to Just Capital's Chief Communications Officer. They are a think tank that looks at trends in companies that are called Just, but also what is the marketplace expecting. And she said that they are in the middle of a study they're doing with Harris, and the findings will be out at the end of the month. She said a big thing that's already showing up is a concern by the public that the generosity or the community mindedness of corporate America is going to be swept aside the minute things go back to normal. So it's really something to think about. So how do you show up? We just walked through a ton of data from the trust barometer. And the three main areas were your humanity, the engagement of your people, and integrity. Right now, the leaders that we're talking to a lot of times are in firefighting mode. And we suggest, well, what if we take a step back, stillness, right? Because when everything's in change, I like to compare it to spinning top in an amusement park, right? Where everything's spinning, 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 and that's absolutely how people are feeling. And it sucks you out into the periphery, right? Which would be all the fires that you're fighting. But the driver of change is actually coming from the center, from the still point that's in the center. And so rather than tiring yourself out and sucked into the periphery, it's really important to come back to your center, because every fire that you fight, every choice that you make is playing out in some way according to your humanity, engagement, or integrity. So we're going to look at this. The hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, most of us have seen it a zillion times. I'm going to run through it really quickly. It's also called the transformational journey. And when you look at the mastery trajectory, any plot line in any movie, songs oftentimes follow the hero's journey. Storytelling narrative is based on the hero's journey, and the transformative experience of becoming fully human from a Maslow's perspective is very much about the hero's journey. So think about the guy that's appearing on the left, and he's near you, right, trotting along, and something happens to create change. It could be an intrinsic disquietude. It could be a shock to the system, a snafu, kind of like COVID and all the changes that we're going through now is. And we have a choice, right, of either pulling up and taking the challenge and diving in and saying, I'm going to work through this. And I'm not only going to work through it, I'm going to try to be better on the other side. So we go down into the pit of the unknown, because if you're not moving into the unknown and forcing yourself to ask new questions, then you're actually not leading. You're not creating a new pathway. You're just following something that someone else has already created. So it's more you're replicating, right? But when you dive into that pit of the unknown, the idea, there's some arrows there, I call it the spin cycle, is you have to experiment a lot and keep coming back to this question, what matters to me really? How do I stay true to myself while I navigate through this uncertainty? And so it's cognitive, it's resources, it's allies, and the idea is that by the end of it, by the time you get up to the trophy, you have been transformed, as has everyone. And you celebrate. So that's one model. But there's this other model, and it's called the heroine's journey. And I know some of you know this. Now, when you look at this, don't think male, female, right? Because it's really easy, if you're a guy, to say, oh, well, that's for women. No. What the heroine's journey is about is moving into the creative process that is oftentimes called the feminine, right? And everybody has the masculine, the linear types of processing, and the feminine, the creative types of processing. And the balanced leader stands for both and leverages both those competencies of linear processing and the ability to move into the non-linear triangulation that's been assigned to the heroine's journey. So you see the fingerprint that says all of us are born unique. And at some point we wake up and go, oh, I want to make it in life. I want to make it in society, better conform. So I'm going to get my checklist and I'm going to do everything I have to do to get in and be successful. And you get some payoff from it, but a lot of us wake up at some point going, is this it? Because there's something about that that is not enough, no matter what the job title is or the pay, etc. Something about us longs for more. And we move into a deeper question about impact and legacy. We move into a question of how am I going to impact the world around me? And it has us start to consider multiple stakeholders. It has us start to think about the environment or think about the growth of other sectors of the planet, right? It has us still bear in mind the needs of our business, but it also has us start to think about what's my heart yelling at me about to make some impact on. And through the end of that process, as you see the yin and yang, you come through it and you're balanced. And this is really the opportunity that all of us face all the time, but never so much as we do right now. Because right now, our systems are going haywire. We've had clients in very conservative segments in private equity come to us and saying to us, forget time management, forget the ability to delegate. Right now, we need a deeper set of questions that we would have never been able to ask of our leadership. But because none of those competencies, none of those skills are going to get us through this, it's really time to ask ourselves, who are as leaders and what do we stand for? So this is what I'm going to invite you guys to actually do, because all of you have been through a hero's journey. So I want you to uncross your legs and I want you to sit back. And when I ask you to think about a time of challenge, something should be coming up, something that you really didn't know how you would get through. Something that you felt was above and beyond you, that made you really uncomfortable. And maybe you're going through it right now. And that's fine too. I know a lot of us are. But I want you to think about, what is that call to action? And how would you frame that call? And it could be helpful to write this down. What is your call? Because you are going to get together and talk about this. What is your call? This is the wake up. This is the no turning back, Jose. This is the we got to roll forward. What is that call for you? What does that call bring up? Because there is an emotional component. Do you wish it would just go away? Or can you turn towards it and say, I am in. I'm going to work through this. Somehow on the other side of this, things are going to have evolved in a good way. So look at what that emotional response is. Call. And then I want you to imagine or recall what you called on inside of yourself. What did you weigh? What are you weighing to get through this challenge? Again, this could be a historical, it could be a current one. What came into the play for you? It will really help you to write this down, because the minute you get on the phone with each other or breakouts with each other, you're going to forget. And honoring your own wisdom is a mastery practice that helps you evolve as a leader. What do you weigh as you look at this challenge? What resources, again, historical or current, what resource do you call on? The assumption that we come into a problem, come out the other side, that's not a problem. And it's definitely not courage, because it's not moving into the unknown. We're going right into the belly of the unknown. What do you have to find, scrounge up, unearth, consider that you may have never considered ever before to work through this challenge, either historical or current? And then your last question, if this is a historical challenge, what did breakthrough look like? If it's a current, how will you know when you're on the other side, if it's a current one? So this screen is going to go away in a second because we do not have the technology to have the screen be up while you guys are in your breakout groups. But this is what you're going to go through, okay? And I'd love for you to include what you do to celebrate, because that's a big part of the hero's journey, of the heroine's journey, that our culture poo-poos. Like as soon as we checked a box, we just truck right along. But the celebration is a way to commend the bravery that we've had to surface. Okay, so what you're going to do is go into groups of 3, 2 minutes to say hello, right? Hi, I'm so-and-so, blah, blah. And then each person is going to get 7 minutes to share their journey. And if you want to jot down these points, again, I do encourage you to do that because you may forget them. But with that, I will hand it over to Michael to break you guys up into breakouts.
Thanks, Tevis. And Michael, while Michael does that, if you haven't used the breakout function on Zoom before, you'll get a little box that will pop up at the bottom of your screen inviting you to join a breakout room. And you just need to click on that in order to move over to that space. So thank you. It'll take a minute or 2 while everyone gets transitioned into breakout rooms.
I want a show of hands who had a value like that come up about servant leadership, about empowerment of others, about, yeah, I'm seeing a ton of hands come up. So for a lot of us, that seems to be the call, right? Is when we are in this experience where the culture is not fostering people's best contribution. And that's like the rub that just makes us say, screw it, I'm walking away from this, right? Or I'm gonna become irritant and keep talking about it. And I'm curious for you guys, if it's the moment of recognition that something has to change, that's the hard part, or is it after you've started the change and realized you have to really experiment, that it's not going to be a linear process, that you're going to have to stay in that pit and try this and try that and go over and over again, and things are going to fail along the way? Did anyone have failure along the way? Holly, Howden, or Andrea, do any of you guys want to talk about your failure along the way? I mean, this is leadership, guys. Showing up on this call and talking about this stuff is leadership. So who wants to talk about a series of experiences and failures they had to go through to get to success? Yeah. So do you guys get what this conversation has to do with right now? Is that clear? what does our hero's journey, like, what does the fact that every single one of you has had to overcome huge before, and whether it was forced on you like 9/11 or like now, or whether it was, I just can't take this anymore. There is something in each of us that wants to do better. There is something in each of us stands in any moment and says, how do I take a spinning top and not just fight those fires, but step into the center of what's driving all the repercussions and become a part of that. So this is a time for that, because everyone in the news and we're all talking about, well, what's coming and what's going to happen next, and when do we get back to normal? And that's actually not the question. The question is, what do we stand for right now? Because if you can get really clear on what you stand for right now and act from there, then whether we open up tomorrow or we open up a year and a half from now, you become a part of the generative change of what's possible. Oop, hang on, let me get into my screen share. Sorry, you guys.
Looks like Chetana, we got your screen share inadvertently. So if you can stop sharing, that'd be great. There we go. There's Tevis's slide back. Thank you.
So we do these things called executive roundtables, and we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and this question of, what have you long stood for that you've never been able to move the needle on, that right now the DNA of the world, the neurological processing of the world is such that the rules are completely upside down, right? You're seeing our governments are doing things that we never thought that we'd see them do. Our companies are doing things we never thought that we'd see them do. Now is a time for leadership, for every one of us to step forward and ask ourselves, what will my legacy be coming out of this? So it's not something we wait until things get back or create a new normal, right? However you want to frame that from a linguistic perspective, but it's really, what am I going to bring as we move forward? So way back when I was a kid applying for grad school, and I was trying to justify why grad school should let me in, and I stumbled on this quote. When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters, one for danger and one for opportunity. And what's interesting is in our huddle of all these executives, it was commented, well, isn't it manipulation to leverage right now to move something forward that I care about? And I want to ask you that. Is it that? Or is it that you have so many things that you've cared about in corporate culture, or you've cared about in management or leadership, or a balanced scorecard, or multiple stakeholdership? Maybe there's so much you've cared about for a long time, and right now the world is finally scratching its chin and saying, maybe we should have thought about that. Maybe that does make sense, because right now we're seeing the repercussions. So you can think about it for yourself, yes, in terms of conscious capitalism. And I warned Amanda and Alexander, I was like, I've got the 4 pillars up. I don't mean this as a plug, but I do mean it as a way to really think together. If we're going to make something a place where you can make a mark through all of this, in your own business, in your relationships with others, with other providers, in your family choices, in the organizations that you lead, your team, your whole company, what can you really stand for? Because even companies with tons of people and resources have to pick their battles, right? You can't become an enlightened company in one fell swoop. But you can think to yourself, where is a place that through the instability of right now, me asserting a core value can really become a navigational true north for what I stand for as we go to the other side? Because right now, this is again from the trust barometer, it has not been happening. Companies talk about stuff, right? But all the cool stuff they talk about are where their performance measurements are lowest, which may be different now. We'll have to see what the trust barometer says going forward. But really, what they're doing pretty good at is same as it ever was, right? Just pushing the same agenda as always. We have got to be a part of this change. This pre-COVID, but again, people don't want to spend money on companies that don't stand for solid human values. Just Capital reinforces this all over the place. Capitalism is the single most dynamic force for wealth creation the world has ever seen. Does it have to really just go to the top 1%? Can we spread it out, right? Can we spread it out? Trust in companies is still really low. So you guys can see these stats. We want an economy that lifts all boats. I'm just giving you the stats to support you so that the next time you're sitting around that boardroom table, you can pull out the stats if you'd like. The company, the public has not been buying the assertions even of the roundtable, right, that came out months ago and said, we're all going to take a multi-stakeholder position. The public is not buying it. And I'm going to send you guys these slides so you can see them. So the cool thing is that Just Capital chunks this up into quintiles, right? So like 20%, they basically rank companies by quintiles according to who's the most just across a spectrum of metrics. And what they show, and it goes up in to 2020, is that those companies who are the most rated as just outperform the ones who are not. So this is just to give you another argument, right? Prior to COVID rearing its head, flows to ESG-based funds were far outpacing flows of investment to traditional funds, right? These are all arguments that you can make. And the reason I'm giving them to you right now is that you can arm yourself with this data when you sit around a boardroom Zoom, right? Because we're not in person anymore, but a boardroom Zoom, and have conversation. This is what people are wanting in the age of COVID. And I'll send this to you. You can also see this on the Just Capital site. Last but not least, here is how employers are responding. Only 6% of employers had started to have layoffs. Suspended services, work from home, kind of the logistical ways that work happens has shifted, but a lot of policies have not yet caught up. And this is what people are going to be remembering. So this is my challenge to you, right? This quote has oftentimes been associated with Steve Jobs, that he just stole it from this ad guy named Rob Sultanen. And he says, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, vilify them, or glorify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Be unignorable, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. In your hero's journey, how many of you found yourself thinking at some point, they're going to think I'm crazy? How many of you were called crazy? Right? How many of you in your hero's journey found yourself butting up against decades old assumption about how things are done, invisible kind of handcuffs to the culture that you are participating in, and that's what you were rejecting? Like, this is real, this willingness to be crazy and take a stand. And we need this right now. We need this from every one of us. So I want you to think for a second about what you have cared about through this crisis, above and beyond your own personal well-being and that of your family. If you're going to flex, right now's the time to do it. Because right now you kind of get a hall pass for being crazy. If you're going to flex, what would you flex on? What would you nudge forward? And then I'm going to ask Michael to open up the chat, and we're going to up the ante just a little bit, because I want to actually commit to it. And no one's going to know, like, conscious capitalism fairy is going to hover over you at night and say, oh, you didn't keep your promise that you did on your chat. But there's something really powerful about typing in a commitment that no one's ever going to hold you accountable for, but you are. Your heart will know, and you are a leader, and you will know that you shared this. So I really want to invite all of you guys to pop into the chat just one commitment. How would you flex? What is this step towards legacy? Okay, wait. Couple more, you guys. Keep it going. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple of things. Not to hide my more unconventional views, to work towards life-giving cultures by writing, speaking, coaching, and consulting. Be authentic, embody my beliefs. Working diligently for a clear, compelling message, integrate belonging and resilience. To practice resilience. To lead by example. To let go of needing to be perfect and focus on growth, to walk the floor rather than stay in an ivory tower, helping people and organizations gain clarity around what is important now. Guys, this is doable. And this has more to do with how you show up and becomes a guidepost for you. So, so I wanted to, hopefully we can get this chat everyone, so you guys can see what your compadres shared. And I want to pause for Q&A, and I'm just going to tell you guys, if you guys want to get involved with us, just hit me up. We do roundtables. We love having conversations like this. A lot less sage on the stage. For our typical conversations, we like to get everyone talking and ideating. So if you want to get involved with us, please do. We do all kinds of leadership processes and immersions, but I want to open up the floor for any Q&A or commentary, good, bad, indifferent, please.
going to try to help see if we have any hands going up.
Hi, Willie.
Hey, Amanda. One thing I would like to ask Tevis to make a difference between managers and leaders, because you don't have the same vision or the same reaction or the same behavior from these two different categories of people, and they are very, very different.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that what's different about them is purview and influence, right? But I think that when you ask yourself, if you believe in servant leadership and if you believe that leadership can be ubiquitous, right, that it's something all of us can do, this notion that all of us can benefit from establishing a navigational true north, i.e. exist, right? So when you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I know has been in a lot of presentations in this, but also in a lot of culture and leadership gatherings, right? This notion of base needs, of security, of reward and recognition, and going up into creativity, the idea that only a leader is entitled to go to that aspect of self-actualization is what I'm saying is a disservice to the organization, and that everyone throughout the organization, from the cab driver to the cashier to the CEO to the sweeper, right? Everyone has this human longing for dignity and contribution. And if we can appeal to that as leaders and not be threatened by that, then the organization will benefit, because we will be calling forth the best in everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thank you for that, Willie. We're seeing in the chat box, Tevis, we have a question from Adam Lofquist. If you could unmute yourself and ask your question, Adam.
Yeah, so I think my question is, as I think as a leader with a title or a leader by a title, it's easier to implement these things. But if you're someone who may not be in a typical leadership role, do you have any suggestions, or have you noticed anything has worked in the past as far as how to help change the mind of your boss or your leadership team, as how to embrace these things, and how to be a conscious capitalism leader without a job title of that as a leader within the company, official job title, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great one thing. That's why we included so much data in this conversation. This could have been a full day, a full week workshop. But the reason I packed it first with data is that for a lot of linear thinkers, that's going to be the first thing they look to justify making any kind of change. And my friend Jeff Cherry was on here for a while, but he's got some great blog posts on medium.com that speaks about this as well. And that is, if you can arm yourself with data and show the market returns, that helps the linear thinkers go, oh, well, maybe this isn't just soft skills, right? But the other thing too is, it's this crazy thing, like you're a cyclist, Adam, you shared that with me, right? And you talked about a false plateau, right? That sometimes on your journey, you go down into this pit and you start coasting, right? Because the effort to get up the hill is so great, right? And so you just kind of persist in what is uncomfortable but tolerable, kind of like the water's been turned up, but you're not quite yet boiling, so you're not going to jump out. The crazy thing that all of us have to do is pick our battles, right? And that sounds funny because right now with the spinning top and there's so many fires to fight, the question is on a case-by-case basis, which conversation is worth having? Because you're not going to change that leader across the board, but maybe there's some wiggle room on A, B, or C that when you back it up with some data and speak to what they do care about, you can move things forward. And I see that Amanda's nodding, so I'm glad I haven't gone and counter conscious capitalism. But pick your battles and start to go up that hill, not by killing yourself by trying to cycle up a vertical, but find something with a little bit of a gradient, because otherwise you're just going to slide back down. And it is experimentation and repetition. That's the other thing about the hero's journey, right? There's not just one. They go on over and over and over and over again throughout our lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big thing to bear in mind in speaking to leaders, is it's not a one-shot thing. It's a relationship. And so by you embodying what you believe in, finding ways to meet them instead of trying to convince them, just to meet them and share the data, baby steps.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
Can I add something? Lead
by
example. Yeah. People will notice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually a great way to close out. And Tevis, if you can let me share my screen here at the end for our final connection point here. And one of the things that we talk about, the reason I was nodding so vigorously was in the conscious capitalism community and even through our consultant certification program, one of the things that we're constantly talking about is meeting people where they're at on their journey. And so that very much flows with what Tevis was sharing of meeting whoever those leaders are in your company of where they're at. Maybe they need data, maybe they need to meet someone else from another company that has, implemented some of these practices. There's lots of ways to help people make a connection with the content, even if you're not in a formal executive or leadership role. So thank you so much, Tevis, for this presentation. I love the interactiveness and the challenge that you issued to the community, and there's a lot of great content on those slides. So thank you for sharing those with the community. Anything else that you want to say in closing before? Okay, great. So deep brow of gratitude. Go ahead.
No, just thank you. That's all I was saying. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, tomorrow we'll be back here again with our next session. Tomorrow we'll be featuring Tim Kelly, who actually is one of those certified consultants that you may have heard from last Monday. And he is going to be helping us to walk through some processes to stay committed to your purpose during uncertain times. Tim is fascinating. He's a former commanding officer in the Navy, and he is now a global expert on purpose and non-hierarchical leadership. So quite the interesting hero's journey for him as well. So thank you again, Tevis, and thank you to everybody for joining us. We will see you again tomorrow. Stay safe and healthy. Good night.